Dubbed the King of Underground Journalism, you're listening to the Destroyers of Fake News, Kristan T. Harris and Don Via Jr. on the Rundown Live. Feed your brain and grow healthy ideas. Tune into the Rundown Live, your forecast into the future.
It's that time again. Time to relax, kick up your feet, grab your favorite beverage and tune in to the Rundown Live, your forecast into the future.
Warning. Abnormally loud music may be contained within this broadcast, as well as information that may cause your brain to explode. So if you're not hip, or maybe you're just plain old, please find another broadcast that's suitable for you. You're listening to the Rundown Live, rundownlive.com on kgradb.com. I'm your host with the most, Kriston T. Harris, and riding shotgun with me is always the big, fluffy, lovable Don Vi Jr. We have a great broadcast lined up for you guys today, as this broadcast has been blowing up and exploding. Do you know, Don, I'm viral. We'll talk about that in a minute. But before we do, we got to plug KGRA. Make sure you guys check out kgradb.com, kgradb. Let's go there for you guys, listeners who don't know. kgradb.com is our syndication. If you check it out, it's home to Clyde Lewis, Ground Zero, one of the largest broadcasts in his time frame, amongst a bunch of other intelligence shows. Some of them fun, some of them weird, some of them, police shows, criminal shows, paranormal shows. Caravan at Midnight with John B. Wells is another big one. And, of course, yours truly, the Rundown Live. Dark Matters is on there. That's Don Ecker's show. That's a big guy from the 80s. Back in the day, he was doing all sorts of, like, George Norrie, coast-to-coast AM style stuff. But that being said, you can find out everything you need to know on the rundownlive.com. There we got articles, we got news, and a way to donate. We are 100% listener funded, so go hit that donate button. Donate $2, $3, $5, $10, whatever it might be. Come buy a t-shirt if you want one. PM us. We have one XL and one large left, and a bunch of 2Xs and 3Xs. We're running low, and we've had stuff going viral on the website. I was on the American Journal, a very large broadcast that reaches an incredibly large amount of people, and I had a video go viral about my presentation on geoengineering on the broadcast, which is a very interesting concept about spraying aluminum oxide and barium into the stratosphere through Welsbach cloud seeding and its potential environmental implications. And that's been going on since 1991, according to UN papers within the United States confines of the United States. At least for about 10 years, they were doing it, probably since then. But aluminum, oxide, barium, salts, all interesting stuff. So make sure, if you guys haven't checked out Band.video, look it up. It's on American Journal. That video's got thousands. I think it's up to over 10,000 views. And that's in a day. I remember when viral was like 100,000 views or 1 million views, bro. I remember getting those views before YouTube decided to ban anything that they don't agree with.
Yeah, it's the landscape has certainly changed a lot in the last few years.
Hey, I want to say, Miss Maria Wilson, you have a Blemmy that's holding Bugs Bunny there. Dude, isn't it crazy how often Blemmies come up in the show? People don't know what the Greek Blemmy is, but we talk about it. It seems like maybe we need a t-shirt with a Blemmy, like lifting weights or reading books or something like that. I don't know. We got new shirts coming on the way, so if you guys are looking for new ways of supporting us, you can. We have a guest today. I got to make sure we plug him. David Patterson is going to be joining us. We're going to be talking about, you guessed it, economic singularity. As our futurism weeks are coming to an end, today's show will be no different. I'm sure it's going to be a very exciting broadcast on. And, a lot of people are really hyped about Monday. You know what's going on Monday, right, Don?
Probably has something to do with that ridiculous eclipse that everybody's going on about.
Yeah, what's the deal? Why are so many people so excited about this eclipse? Like, they're just like, let's talk about the eclipse. There's different types of eclipses, and I guess this one everyone thinks is the apocalypse. Apocalypse.
yeah. It's I'm not usually the guy to be the cynic.
You're
or
not the woo-woo guy
or the pessimist.
You are. You're
I
the
definitely
guy.
No. I definitely can be that guy, but I'm saying I'm usually not the one to be the cynic or the nihilist or the pessimist. But I would really chalk up a lot of the hysteria, so to speak, around the eclipse to just plain old ignorance, man. Like, people they need to find something to occupy their time. Eclipses are not rare. They're not abnormal. It's simply an astronomical event where the moon is moving in front of the sun and casting a shadow. That's what happens when a physical object moves in front of a light source. You get a shadow cast. And, people are making it out to be some big thing that it's not, generally just because I think, they need something to occupy their time, and it's ridiculous and laughable, in my opinion, that it's such a big deal.
Everyone could be all excited, and then it could be overcast and cloudy.
Right. I mean, they're cool. Don't get me wrong. Like, if you can actually see them, like, I'm not knocking, eclipses and whatnot. They're cool. They're pretty. But, like, people ascribing all these, like, mystical things to it. And this is coming from a person who's really into studying esotericism and the occult, and a very active, devout pagan. But not everything falls into that mystical woo-woo category. Sometimes you just have a regular ass astronomical event where a planet or a moon is moving in front of the sun, and it's just doing normal things that they do.
How dare you say the eclipse is normal? What kind of pagan are you? I rebuke your paganism with this. But on the flip side, it's interesting because Gnostics believe it's the second coming of Christ. I've studied under Manly P. Hall's protege, Russell Pine or Jordan Maxwell, and long story there. Jordan Maxwell was a great individual, very intelligent. I got to meet him and hang out with him, and there's pictures of me and former 33rd degree Mason who was at Leo Lion Zagami, and he was involved in a bunch of other societies. And obviously, Jordan Maxwell talked a lot about the planets and the days of the week and where we get Saturn Day for Saturn and the Moon Day for Monday. So it's Moon Day and we have the eclipse. So people are going crazy about it. And I don't know, maybe just people are going to be acting a little weird. But in the news, I should put this on the screen. This is what I saw on the top. This is what's on the top of the Drudge right now. Guess who's all riled up about it? Christians. Christians are. For some Christians, solar eclipse signals second coming of Christ, which wasn't even the dude's name, right? It was Yeshua. I don't know where they get Jesus from. Jesus was the son of, who was he? Like Apollo?
So we get, okay, the reason why the English version of Yeshua is Jesus. So basically what happens is when you translate the original versions of the Bible from Aramaic into Hebrew, there are certain characters within the Aramaic alphabet that do not exist within the Hebrew alphabet. So Yeshua goes from Yeshua to Jesus, and then when you translate, because instead of translating it, you essentially have to transliterate it because of the differentiation in the alphabet, and then it goes from Yeshus eventually into Jesus when it goes through these other languages from Hebrew into Greek, and then Greek into English, and so it's essentially the process of transliterating rather than actually translating. Because if we were to refer to him by the angalicized or the English version of Yeshua, we would call him Joshua.
That's what I was gonna say. I thought it was Joshua.
Yeah.
I mean, so, and where does the Christ come from? How do we know his last name?
So Christ actually is a title rather than a last name. So Christ is the English version of the Latin word Christos, which basically means anointed one. Yeah,
anointed oil. It's anointed. Mm-hmm. It's a special. It's a holy oil, and a lot of people believe that's the reproductive oil, which gets into the whole seminary and the occult origins of the Catholicism mystery ideology. But it's interesting. So anyways, does upcoming solar eclipse signal the second coming of Jesus? In all likelihood, it says no, but that hasn't stopped people from speculating that it does. The New Testament is peppered with the reference of Jesus' second coming, the time when Christians believe Jesus will return to earth, the wicked will be judged, and the righteous rewarded. So people, I think they, I don't know. I think that people are just dying to believe in a second coming and that this is it, because the world has gone so array. There's so much going on in the world that's pulling everyone in so many different directions. A lot of them aren't good, Don. I mean, we're looking at a world where not a lot of us are sustainable. We don't grow our own food, right? We don't know gardening. There's earthquakes. I was this morning, again, I think Taiwan got hit with a giant earthquake yesterday. Like, earthquakes seem to be more rabid. Volcanoes are going off. And, just weird things are happening all across the planet. Animals are, dying and floating on the shore, and droves and birds falling from the sky. And, I don't know what causes all those things, but it could be the magnetic pole switch, which could be it. But, for the Christians who are philosophically, theologically bound to the idea of a second coming of Christ and potentially a rapture, which that idea was invented many years later. That's not original thought process there with the Christianity and religion. it's interesting. It's interesting, and I'm kind of curious if that makes people like even the statue and the image we have of Jesus. That's not what he looked like.
Right. Yeah.
Where do we get that from? Isn't it like some
So
like king's son or something like that? If I remember.
So there is a popular theory, and there's evidence to support it, and there's also evidence to contradict it. But it's a popular theory that during the Renaissance era, so around the late 1400s, 1500s, because I don't remember the exact date, the image of Yeshua that we have now was actually an artist's rendition that was commissioned by Pope Alexander VI, otherwise known as Rodrigo Borgia, to resemble his son Cesare. And if anyone knows anything about the Renaissance history, Italy, the Borgias are essentially the most corrupt family in that time period. They're Rodrigo Borgia, a particularly nasty piece of work. His son Cesare put in charge of the papal army. Again, another very nasty piece of work, accused of assaulting and having multiple copulations with his sister and things of that nature. So just a really nasty family all around. So there's, like I said, evidence to potentially support that theory. There's also evidence to debunk it. We also, prior to that time, have a number of artistic depictions of him in the same way, but less looking like Cesare, but still pretty Romanized. And so it's more of the working theory is that as Christianity merged with the state following the First Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, that was held by the Emperor Constantine, that basically once it became the main religion of the Roman Empire, that the depictions of him became more Romanized to basically aid with the conversion of people accepting him because, hey, it's easier to worship a guy if he looks like your people.
Okay, well, there you have it. I don't know. Maybe he comes back and throws a big EDM party in the sky, and all of a sudden we got raising lights, and he's like, "I'm back!" Like, we're gonna judge the party. That's what we're gonna do. And I'm not trying to be blasphemous for all the believers out there. No, I'm a born again Christian myself. I just listen to everyone, question everything, and don't believe unless I can prove it with my own two hands. And there's some things that I just like to question. I'm not quite sure what they mean, but here is where I wanted to be. Maria Wilson says in the chat, like the world is too serious sometimes. And I know when we just had Easter, and talking about Easter, most of those traditions we don't even get from the church, and a lot of people don't know those origins, and we don't have shows on Easter. So I used to do an Easter presentation called The Rabbit, the Egg, and the Hoax, or so it was something along that line. I did it for many years, and it talked about where majority of the traditions we got from Easter stem back to a couple of deities, Semiramis, the whore of Babylon, who also is known for making the Hanging Gardens, who was also Nimrod's mother and wife. Nimrod was considered the founder of the craft of Freemasonry, according to the Masonic Encyclopedia on Freemasonry. Albert Mackey, who, by the way, Albert Mackey's great-granddaughter, reached out to me when I gave a presentation on FM radio. I was filling in for Dr. Leonard Coldwell's radio broadcast many years ago, and I was talking about the rabbit and the egg and where they come from, and the idea that semen and the rain is semen impregnates the ground. So the egg fell from the sky into the Euphrates River, and it was Semiramis, or Ishtar per se. Some believe that's another name for Semiramis, just renamed. And the egg was in danger, and a dove came and rolled it across to the ground, and it hatched open, and Ishtar, or Semiramis, came forth and rewarded the bird by turning into a quick mating bunny, and that's where you get the rabbit and the egg from. It's a fertility ritual, and there's all these other things that come from it.
Yeah, there's also the alternative theory that some scholars postulate to be more probable, but also potentially merges with what you were talking about, so perhaps a later iteration of the whole Semiramis Ishtar thing. But there we have in, I believe, mid to high Germany, during the pre-Christian period, there was a goddess named Estar or Ostar, and there was a holiday called Ostara that was centered around her around the springtime, a fertility holiday, and some of her symbols were she was heavily associated with rabbits because they're very fertile creatures, and obviously eggs are symbols of fertility and things of that nature, and so they're very heavily associated with her. And during the Christianization period, because that was such a popular holiday, as happened during the Christianization period, they just adopted those sort of those customs and traits into their celebrations as a means of making it easier to force the pagans into believing what they believed. Because, you know, if it's similar enough, sure, why not? You know, we'll switch over and believe it. I mean, it's close enough to what we believe, right?
Well, right. And I was looking up this real quick, and it said Nimrod married his own mother and became a powerful king. In fact, the people over which Nimrod ruled elevated him to the status of godlike, like God-man, like the sun. They worshipped the sun, and they claimed that he was the first sun deity in history. Nimrod was eventually killed, and his body was cut into pieces, and his phallus was sent over a reproductive organ was sent to Semiramis, which he reanimated and had an immaculate conception of Tammuz on December 25th. Interesting date. And told the people of Babylon that Nimrod ascended to the sun, and that the sun should be worshipped and be called Baal, Baal, and the sun god and Queen Semiramis was then deified as a moon goddess for Monday. This woman was essentially creating a religion herself and setting herself up as a goddess of earth. She also was known later on and became known as Ishtar, and it was pronounced Easter, and her moon egg became known as Ishtar's egg. This is where the central theme of eggs originated in connection with the Easter holiday. That's according to a religious encyclopedia. Whether or not that's correct, I don't know. That's one of the many ways. Like you said, Don, it's interesting. It's like bonfire. It's a bone fire because the Babylonians, which, by the way, cannibal, its etymology goes back to cannibal Babylonian priest. And bonfire is where we get bonfire from, because after you sacrificed either the children or whoever it was, all that was left was the bones, or animals, or maybe you threw your bones in there. I'm not quite sure. There's all these different origins. It's interesting to do research and hear what everyone's story is and try to figure out where it comes from and what it means, because we just don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, you know, that's one of the reasons I love history so much, is because it's one big mystery, and so you just kind of sit there and you're just trying to decipher the clues, and it's really cool. I don't get it when people are like, "Oh, I don't like history. It was my least favorite class in school."
Theology or religion or anything like that. I find it all fascinating.
Exactly. Yeah. Because not only is it just really cool, that's just kind of the geek in me, but it's also, the philosopher in me is like, it's so important for us to understand history, because if we don't really know the truth of where we came from, we don't really understand who we are and where we are right now. And who we are and where we are right now, and our understanding of it directly affects our where we're going and what we're doing in the future. So to better prepare ourselves to do our best for the future, we have to understand the past. We have to know where we come from and origins and things of that nature.
So that being said, there's a lot going on in the world, and we just missed Easter. It's the end of the week. We have a great guest, David Patterson, going to be joining us in a few. But I wanted to kind of tie this in. So traditions, theology, religion, culture, right? Culture. And preserving culture is really important. But as we evolve into these smart cities and 15-minute cities, and something that a lot of futurists call economic singularity, I'm kind of interested to see how culture will permeate and whether it will go away, or people will just start worshiping AI, and like, because AI will know everything, right? It's like God. I think the Google exec over there has an AI God that everyone worships. So they will take pity on us humans when it becomes all godlike, you know? And, we were talking about computer brain chip interfaces, and maybe in the future, AI would be able to download into your brain and then take over your body, or you could use it like in the TV series Halo, and have your avatar beam in front of you, and visually you can see your AI, personal assistant, and they could be there and only you will see them. Very interesting concept, but economic singularity is interesting. And one of the things I've been watching for is, are these 15-minute cities going to be luxurious, free, like travel type cities, or are they going to be surveillance metadata collecting spy zones of 1984? And in the news, and I'm not trying to knock singularity, economic singularity, because there's a lot of good things that can come of it, but in the news, and I want to share this on the screen, we're seeing an incredible boom in police drones and police robots. Here's an article we didn't get to last week, and that is robot dog takes bullet for police. So the police are using robot dogs. And we saw in 2015 the first man killed by a robot. The robot dropped like some kind of grenade or something in Texas and blew up and killed the guy that was shooting at the police. But Roscoe, the robot dog deployed to Massachusetts State Police, was shot while aiding officers during a standoff in Cape Cod. The incident, which took place on March 6th, marks the first time a robot dog had been shot while on duty. It is also the first time one of Boston Dynamics' famous robot dogs has been in a perilous situation. And that's one story, but also we're seeing some pretty interesting stories. Now, I'm going to say this is a good story. Drone surveillance. Duluth police use drone to find missing 12-year-old. But what need will we have for police in the future if we can just have drones flying around, scanning tickets and just mailing you tickets, or identifying crisis? It's interesting. And in economic singularity, I wonder what the world will hold. I really do. So our guest that will be joining us here in just a moment, his name is David Patterson. He has an early career in computer network systems during the early days of the internet. He is a social entrepreneur. Starting in 2010, he lived for 5 years in Haiti, creating an online learning center run by local volunteers. He's worked on many projects and currently is working active in the community, a social group that uses motivation, morality to help individuals and communities achieve optimal outcomes in health, prosperity, and education. By the year 2030, he states human civilization will reach an optimal end state to the development of technology, a state of perfection beyond which no improvement can be made, which will enable unlimited prosperity and the solution to all human problems. After some time to implement and adopt and state technology, our civilization will reach an optimal and stable social, political, and economic state, at which time we will meet the necessary criteria to make contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. Welcome to the broadcast. Thank you for joining us today, David Patterson. What an interesting intro. Endstate2030.com is his website. If you guys are interested in checking that out, we'll put that on the screen. But man, that's a mouthful. By the year 2030, you think it's that fast? That's like 6 years away. 6 years away.
Thanks, Kristan and Don. Thanks for having me on the program. I didn't expect it to happen that soon. It's my projections are based on analyzing the rate of development of hundreds of individual technologies, and that rate of development is accelerating. But what's notable is that all these technologies are going to reach their optimal, perfect end state by 2030. So, for example, televisions, there's 2 or 3 different television technologies, but they're all converging towards having a perfect image beyond which it won't be possible to improve it. The contrast will be perfect, the color will be perfect, the resolution will be so high that improving it won't make any difference. You won't see any difference. We're almost there right now, and the next 5 years will clearly be enough for us to reach that end state. If you look at games, 3D games, Unreal Engine 5 is very close to reality. And within the next 5 years, especially with assistance from AI, we're going to have video games that are completely realistic, and you can't go beyond reality. You can't make something more real than if it looks like reality. With artificial intelligence, that's really what's going to completely disrupt our economy and society. I'm predicting, of course, that will happen by the end state. So we will have the end state in 2030, and we will have the economic singularity in 2030. The general theory of the singularity predicts further developments beyond 2030, where computers become more and more intelligent. But the problem with that is that if we have artificial intelligence that can solve any problem, answer any question, if they're diagnosing disease to a level of 100%, or at least as good or better than human experts, then we reach a point where we can't go beyond that. if we cure all diseases, we reach a point where we can't go beyond that. So that's what I have noticed. I've been tracking these developments for several decades now. I wasn't sure of the timing until maybe 10 years ago. I started to notice all the trends converging on 2030. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen at 2030 with the economic singularity until large language models came out at the end of 2022. That's when I switched my thinking, because initially I was thinking there would still be jobs for humans. I thought, well, autonomous vehicles are going to replace all drivers, and that's going to be a big impact, deliveries, taxi drivers. But I thought creative jobs would be safe. And large language models have proved the opposite. Creative jobs are already threatened. Artists, writers, editors, those jobs are at risk too. And I just don't see any job that cannot be done and done better by artificial intelligence. And we see that we have enough time between now and 2030 to reach the optimal state for artificial intelligence, essentially. And I think a lot of people are starting to see that. Originally, the projections of people working in artificial intelligence were that we would have artificial intelligence by 2050 or 2100. Recently, there's a lot of people saying it's going to be next year or in 2 years. And there's serious people saying that it will be within 5 years. I think Sam Altman of OpenAI, the company that does ChatGPT, he has said we'll have it within 5 years. The AI that is error-free, that doesn't have all these hallucinations. Elon Musk, who is working on an artificial intelligence called Grok, he has said that by 2029, he believes that we will have an artificial intelligence that is smarter than all humans combined. Elon is known for some optimistic predictions. I don't really think we're going to have more intelligent AI, more intelligent than humans, but it will have equivalent to very high human intelligence, and it will have access to all human knowledge. So it will be like an intelligent person who can do everything, do the work of a doctor, a lawyer, and answer any question because it's got that vast catalog of knowledge.
So by the time this occurs in around 2030, precisely how quickly would this affect the human job market? Would it be an overnight thing, or would it be a gradual lead up to it to 2030? Or how would that go about with the way that this would cause the decline of the human job market?
So the interesting thing about 2030 is it's a point. It's not like there's no long transition. We're in the transition right now. So the next 5 or 6 years, we're going to be transitioning, and it's already started. Some jobs are already being replaced with AI or augmented to programmers, writers. That's going to accelerate over the next 5 or 6 years. What happens at the actual end state is that critical things start to happen, like autonomous vehicles will be completely reliable. They'll be 100 times safer than human drivers. And so we can then have vehicles that drive without any driver supervising. So then we can have autonomous taxis, autonomous delivery vehicles. And that dramatically reduces the cost of deliveries and transportation. We will also have humanoid robots. Humanoid robots basically use a form of autonomy where they're able to move through a space and see where they are and interact with objects. And humanoid robots will be able to do all human labor. So that's a critical point beyond which things get really, it's impossible to imagine really what's going to happen. But there's going to be a complete transformation of the economy because everything will be produced at such a low cost because we won't need labor. And then we have the problem of income. How do people get their income? And some form of central distribution of income will be required. And ultimately everyone will have the same income. Right now we have a situation where doctors and lawyers earn more because they're smarter and they spend the time in school. But if they're replaced by AI, there's no premium for education. There's no premium for intelligence. And so everyone will just get the same income through taxation that will be distributed to them. This is sort of like what people have been talking about with communism. They were trying to get to it too early and force the situation. But in
what
fact,
you're describing is fully automated luxury communism, I believe, for our listeners out there that don't know the cool term that the kids are using in the techno world. It's fully automated luxury communism, or automation and robots will do everything, with a borderline Gene Roddenberry world where you get some kind of universal basic income just for living, or based off of what was my big concern, some form of social credit score, where that seems a little bit more dystopic, but I'm sure there's going to be different variations of this model throughout the world, and people will be competing for what is the best model of, if it's more of a libertarian or a democratic republic or socialist or communist or some form, but of idea out there when you're talking about this type of automation. There's a lot to unpack, because you literally are a great talker. You just went through a whole bunch of stuff, and Don was asking, the transition about job loss. I was like still stuck in the video game thing. So we're going to let you continue to talk about this, but then maybe we're going to reel it back and talk about real life video games and brain to computer interfaces, and Ray Kurzweil's statement that we'll have nanobots, partying in our brain, listening to techno. Not literally, he didn't say that. He said we'll all have nanobots in our body in abundance by the year 2030. And where they're coming from, I'm kind of interested, because I'm reading a lot of different things there.
So as far as nanobots, I don't really see that technology developing, nor do I see a necessity for it. We're going to cure all human diseases without the need for nanobots. What's happening right now in medical technology is really amazing. Just in the past couple of weeks, there are 2 potential cures for HIV that have been developed, and one of them is entering clinical trials in humans. That's something that we just have not been able to do for decades. And the reason we're able to do it is, in the past, we would develop medical technology just by chance. When penicillin was developed, it was noticed that this mold would kill bacteria. And so they extracted penicillin from it. We gave it to humans, and it killed bacteria in humans. But we had no idea how the penicillin drug worked. We had no idea what it was doing in the body. Now we're able to do detailed analysis of the actual function of the molecules of the drugs and the actual function of the internal molecules in our cells in our bodies. And we're able to study the interactions, so we can fine-tune the drugs to have very specific on-target effects and enhance those effects, and avoid off-target effects, which are the side effects. So, for example, we're developing painkillers that are as powerful as opioids. They completely eliminate pain, but they don't have the addictive side effects. So we're able to really engineer medical breakthroughs now in a way that we could not in the past.
So one of the issues that I see potentially coming up with that is that it seems like it potentially underestimates the capacity for the way that the system as it's currently established operates on a mindset of greed and control. So when we look at things like big pharma, we can see very clearly, and this is demonstrated through numerous declassified documents and just a general look at the last 3 or 4 years, that the current system, at least in part, operates as in a way that profits from perpetuating illness, and basically, you don't make money off of healthy people, and you don't make money off of dead people, so you make money off of sick people continuing to take treatments for a really long time. What, in your view, is going to happen when those two things converge, when that for-profit medical system ultimately does have to end up being confronted by the fact that this technology that does possess the capability of curing all human diseases is being developed and will continue to develop, whether they like it or not. Is it going to create some? Oh, obviously, it's going to create a conflict. But how do you see that conflict unfolding?
That's a good question. Drugs are protected by patent law, so the patent typically protects them for 17 years. So if we are going to have cures for all human diseases by 2030, the patents would expire by 2047. So after that, we're in a situation where anyone would be able to freely make the drugs. And the barriers to entry are the critical thing in competition and driving down prices. So a patent is a critical barrier to entry. You cannot produce that particular drug without permission. And so that gives drug companies a lot of, essentially a monopoly that's granted to them by the government. Now, the government could decide to either buy out the patents or revoke the patent law after 2030. But the other thing that's going to happen is that, for example, with HIV, it looks like there's going to be a dozen different approaches to cure it. So if one is if they're all patented, that's fine. They still have to compete with each other. And the same with treatments for cancer. There's a lot of different kinds of cancers, but there's dozens of treatments in development. So there would be a limit to how high they can set the price of one treatment if another person can come in with a new treatment and compete. Then there's the issue of what do we want to do as a society through our government to regulate that, or to buy out the patents, as I said, or to shorten the length of the patents given the dramatic changes we'll have at the end state. The economy is going to completely transform, and the barriers to entry to start a company are going to reduce dramatically. We'll have no more big petrochemical companies, for example, which are there's a very high barrier to entry there. You have to spend billions of dollars to build a refinery. Instead, we're going to have solar panels producing electricity to charge electric cars. There's fairly low barriers to entry to get into that, and that's creates the competition that makes it so that the big players can't just put up their prices, because once they become more profitable, that attracts in new competitors, and people start up companies, and they'll be happy that that's created a market opening for them. Now they can, and this is what the car companies have done in the past, is they can target a new entrant. I think Tesla is the first new car company in the United States in about 100 years that has been successful, and that's because the existing car companies have always squeezed out competition. There's a high barrier to entry. You need billions of dollars to start a car company. And what the car companies do is whatever product the new entrant produces, they'll produce a almost identical product and price it lower using their economic power, their profitability, to subsidize the price of that product and drive that company out of business, or give them an offer they can't refuse, offer to buy them out. And they'll take it, and then they'll be gone. And that's happened throughout history. I think it's going to change dramatically once anyone can buy robots and machinery and start a car factory. You can have a robot in your garage, and it can build an electric car part by part. You just give it enough time. You will have all the knowledge through large language models and autonomy technology. So the barriers for entry are going to be a lot lower because of the new technology and because of the autonomous processes that are available.
It sounds like that song by Johnny Cash, One Part at a Time, where he's stealing a part, working at a car manufacturer, and he's stealing a part at a time to build a vehicle, and it's made up of a whole bunch of different car parts. But it's interesting when we start talking about this economic singularity and the idea of robots in our home building cars, amongst many other things. But my concern is, how do we avoid getting to the point of idiocracy, where you mentioned intelligence won't be as important in things like being a lawyer? Obviously, a lot of people believe at some level that man and machine will merge. It's already happening. Tesla's putting chips in people's brains. Some guy was playing Civilization 6 all night, using controlling the mouse with his brain with a brain chip interface, which is fascinating stuff, but we're not too far away from humans being able to just be able to download information into their brain if they so choose. I'm just a little concerned that a large part of the population is going to be in some form of VR contacts or some kind of virtual reality where they're not going to know the difference between reality and the game that they're playing. And you mentioned something earlier on in this broadcast about the fact that video games will get to the point where it'll be hard to differentiate between reality and the video game. And I saw that there was a guy in New Zealand, I think his name is Gene Newell, and he was saying that with brain chip or the brain chip interface is the first step, but the non-invasive brain computer interfaces, because of nanobots, they'll be able to create some kind of network in your body, and it will allow you to actually visually share memories. So if you see something, I'll record it, and then you'll be able to share that memory with somebody else, and it'll be just like they were there. There'll be all sorts of different things, but when it comes to video games, what are you seeing as far as the use for video games being more realistic? Because I know for a while we had Nintendo Wii, and it got very less graphic oriented, more fun, more pleasure oriented to have a good time. But I guess with VR, things are getting more real. So.
Well, VR is an interesting technology. It's one of the technologies that I call an end state technology, like autonomous driving. It's something we will only have that will be truly functional at the end state. It's the same with humanoid robots. We'll only really have those and be able to use them by 2030. VR, it's here, and it's been developing for a couple of decades, but it will only be at a state of perfection in 2030. And most people don't want to use it until it's perfect, because it's a technology where until it's perfect, it can be really annoying to see slight errors, and it can make you dizzy. But once it gets to perfection, then there will be rapid adoption by almost everyone. What will happen with the computer games or simulations is that they will be essentially identical to reality. We're already getting very close to that. We see with large language models that you can tell a large language model to write a story. A large language model can also produce an image according to your text description. We will also have large language models that can produce a video game according to your description. Now, this is very similar to what we saw with the holodeck in Star Trek The Next Generation. You could walk into the holodeck and say, I want to be in the 18th century in a castle in Scotland. And the large language model, if you type that scenario in, will be able to write you a great story right now with that scenario. What it will be able to do 5 years from now is it will be able to create a super realistic, like reality, 3D model game that you can interact with a storyline. You won't know what the storyline is because the large language model just made it up. So it's not like buying a game that once you run through it and play the 5 hours, you're done. And if you go back, you'll see the exact same thing. You can continuously develop and evolve, and you can continue in the same game, or you can say, okay, now I want to be on Mars, with Elon Musk building his colony on Mars in the year 2035, and it will just create that for you. So that's what I see happening. I don't really see the brain-computer interface happening very much. I think it's going to be mostly beneficial for people who have difficulty seeing or hearing. The problem is that it would have to interface with something pre-existing in the human brain. So you can't really upload a new language to your brain. Language is involved in so many different areas of the brain that would be very difficult. What you can do is you can bypass the optic nerve and tap into the optic nerve and allow blind people to see. You can allow a certain amount of control, as we've seen already with Neuralink and the young man who got it implanted, and he's able to play video games. because they've tapped into an output circuit of the brain. So we can tap into those input and output circuits, but uploading a new language or new knowledge, there's just not the interface to be able to do that. We have telephones in our pockets, so most of us walk around with them every day. That's our interface to the knowledge and information that we're going to get. Virtual reality is going to become increasingly another interface. Education is something that will become much more practical, because you'll be able to be transported to different times and places. You'll be able to talk to people from history. You can already do it as a chat. You can say, I want to talk to Albert Einstein, and they'll start talking like Albert Einstein, knowing all the things that Albert Einstein has written and how he would reply. So education is going to be fantastic. There's going to be simulation. There's going to be games. Hopefully we don't spend all our time in the virtual world in the future, because we really have to find things to do when we don't have jobs anymore and we're getting the government paycheck.
Well, Lightfield Labs is working hard to make solid light productions of holograms, and it would be interesting to see, because I know William Shatner had himself downloaded to create a digital twin. Just thinking on the fact that I could download myself so my grandchildren or great-grandchildren could have a conversation with their great-grandma and ask them, grandpa, geez, grandpa, and ask him questions, and maybe ask him about his life or what was important or what life was like. But not only that, just other people throughout history. But what's going to be the need of having professors if people can just hire virtual professors or virtual teachers or virtual, in general, like, that's going to change the educational system. Now, something that I know you mentioned, a lot of jobs may be going away because of AI and artificial intelligence, but it's going to be in collaboration with other new tech, which is exciting and fun, like, Light Labs, holographic technology that makes a solid light, like, what I'd call Star Wars, You're My Only Hope, Obi-Wan Kenobi type holograms. And I think it's fascinating that we're getting to this point and that we get to live it, and it's kind of surreal. But at the same point, I'm trying to wonder, how are people going to be able to transition? Because what I see is protests in my mind in the future. I see people pushing for a revolution. I see people being very technophobe, being a big thing, where people are angry about losing jobs and not able to support themselves, and the government may not be interested in helping individuals get new education to learn how to program, because I know that there's going to be opportunities with space exploration and space archaeology and biohybrid robotics and all these things. And robots will, I think, like you mentioned, self-driving cars. I still think that there's going to be a large amount of humans that's going to want to still drive themselves. That's the last damn freedom I got, is that I can go in my car and go wherever the hell I want, when I want. And, there's concerns about weather and, potholes and all these other things. But I think as they start building Wi-Fi roads, and we're going to see more of these things, self-driving cars. But I don't know what the implications are going to be of economic singularity, because I like the idea that we are going to have the holograms, that we are going to be able to sit down and virtually talk to a doctor and beam them into our house, and he'll be able to see us remotely without having to go to the doctor's office, and all these great innovative ideas. I'm just a little concerned that it may cause some form of potential problems with our economy. And the question is how do we arise to a solution with all these crooked politicians? I guess we'd have to replace the politicians with a better option, right?
Well, I'm not sure about the politicians. Definitely they could get some advice from AI and how to run the institutions of government better. But to your specific question, essentially we wouldn't have university professors anymore. We wouldn't have doctors and lawyers. That would all be done by AI. There's really no job that can't be done better by AI, theoretically, once it reaches this optimal end state, which a lot of people in the field of AI are now saying it will. And I believe that's true. So we have to really think about that and be prepared for that, then it's such a dramatic shift. I don't think most people are going to know about it or understand it until it starts happening. I think we'll go through several phases. In the initial phase, which will be from now to 2030, people will still get new jobs as they lose their existing ones, but that will become more difficult as the process accelerates and there are no new jobs to shift to, because what typically happens with technological innovation is it replaces people, but then those people can then go and do other things and serve unmet needs. For example, we do a good job with physical health, not a great job, we could do better, but we don't do enough work with mental health. So doctors who became unemployed in physical health could shift to mental health, except that AI is doing a great job with mental health, at least in the initial tests, and is able to do a better job often counseling and providing advice and knowledge of the science. And the actual mental health profession is in a bit of a crisis where it's not very professional anymore. It's been invaded by a lot of sort of feel-good thinking, and you don't want to upset the patient. You want to make sure they're comfortable and not tell them that there's anything wrong with them. So we're ripe for a lot of our professions to be replaced with AI. In the second phase, we're going to have to get some sort of UBI, universal basic income, initially just for people who can't get a job, people with disabilities. So that will replace our existing welfare systems. Eventually that will evolve into, within years after 2030, that will evolve into a system that will provide support to anyone who wants it, basically, because there just won't be jobs anymore for humans. Humans will still be able to participate in the economy to the extent that they want to or can, if they have some creative thing that they can do, some personal thing that can't be done by computers. Also, anyone who owns land or resources will be able to earn income from that, because land and resources are the only thing that will be left of value that can't be done by AI. All human labor, including intelligent labor, will be able to be done by AI. Physical labor will be able to be done by AI, controlling vehicles and controlling robots. There will be a big disruption. It's not just an economic disruption. There's also a political disruption coming because there's going to be a shift away from elite power and elite control. There's authoritarian governments that are now, for example, Russia invaded Ukraine, I think primarily to strengthen their authoritarian control, because when the country enters into a conflict, people are a traitor if they don't support their government. So now, it used to be if you didn't support Putin, you were smart. Now you're a traitor. So that's the motivation behind invading countries. That's the motivation behind, partially behind Hamas invading Israel. They're backed by Iran. Iran is not doing well. There's lots of protests. But just before Russia invaded Ukraine, there was protests in Belarus and Kazakhstan in which Russia had to intervene to support those governments. And it looked like it was coming for Putin, so he had to do something. He allied with Belarus to invade Ukraine to boost their popularity and their authoritarian control. So this is the kind of thing that's going to happen, because along with the transition to future technologies, especially AI and what the internet is already doing, that undermines the authoritarian power of not only dictators like we have in China and Russia, but also authoritarian and elitist power within our Western democracies. And that's a lot of what we're seeing right now with the actions of the government. Is they're trying to secure elitist control and power as populists are increasingly moving into power. And that's causing we're going to go through a period of some pretty extreme disruption. There's going to be wars. There's going to be protests, possibility of a civil war or a real insurrection, not like January 6th, but a real one. If for example, the current administration tries to block Trump from being elected and the people want him elected, that could cause a lot of problems. They're trying to keep their power, and there's hundreds of billions of dollars in for the group of people who control the government of the United States, the government of any country in the developed world, really. So they're going to struggle to keep their power, and we see that conflict happening right now in the world. And so there's going to be wars, there's going to be revolutions. There was a string of revolutions across the Sahel, which is part of Africa just south of the Sahara. There was about half a dozen countries that got overthrown within the past 2 or 3 years. And France was a colonial power in these countries, still sort of acting as a colonial power, got kicked out. These are these are real dramatic things that are happening because of the ability of people to access information through social media. Now people, even in underdeveloped countries, have smartphones and they're watching TikTok and YouTube, and they're learning what's going on out there in the world and in their own countries. Part of the reason there's such high levels of migration to Europe and the United States is people who are in underdeveloped countries are getting information about what it's like in the rest of the world and compared to their own countries, and they see it's better. And so they also make contacts with the people who can move them between their country and the countries they would prefer to be in. So that's part of the reason that maybe the majority of people in underdeveloped countries would love to migrate if they could. It's really an information revolution.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely fascinating, Don. I think you had some interesting insight earlier, but how do we switch the economy then over to universal basic income? And how does that income have any value if everyone's going to be given the equal amount? Or is it going to be something that's going to be backed in some kind of like gold and silver? Is it going to be cryptocurrency? Well, how does a universal basic income work in this economic singularity? And how do we switch everything over when inflation will just raise the price of everything, knowing that everyone's getting a wage? The price of everything would most likely go up because they know people have expendable income, I would think. And of course, I know automation will allow the price of creating things to go down. The question is will the price of the product go down? And we just don't know. But it's interesting. So how do we implement a universal basic income? I've heard some different ideas. I was curious on your idea. And is there other solutions other than a universal basic income in your mind?
Well, universal basic income would basically be a tax on all production. It could be a production tax or a consumption tax. It doesn't really matter. So a sales tax, essentially. But then it would just be given back to people. So essentially it turns money into a tool for deciding the distribution of the goods that are produced by the robots. Right now, prices are also a tool for allocating labor, but since humans won't be working, they will allocate the labor of robots and autonomous vehicles and AIs to do what we want. We can't do UBI right now. It would just be too expensive. That's why I'm saying it'll happen in 3 phases. So up till 2030, people will just get new jobs mostly. After 2030, when the disruption really starts, we will transition to a universal welfare that anyone who has any sort of disability, homeless people, they'll all get money, because we'll be entering into a period of rapidly increasing economic productivity. Right now we have 2 or 3% growth per year. By 2030, our economic growth will be exceeding 10% a year. I'm not sure how much more than 10%, but it will be extremely rapid economic growth because labor becomes a commodity. Instead of hiring a person at $50,000-$60,000 a year, you buy a robot for maybe $10,000, and it can work 4 shifts a week. And so it's a dramatic reduction in cost. What's going to happen as we move into the third phase is that robots and autonomous systems will replace so much labor that there won't be additional need for things. And so there won't be jobs to shift into. At that point, we're going to be into a very rapid increase in economic production. So even if the UBI amount remains the same, what's going to happen is prices are going to drop rapidly. Right now, a car costs what a car costs, like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, mostly because of the labor involved in producing it, selling it. Once all that labor is gone, a car that costs $50,000 today will cost $5,000 by 2035. Or an equivalent electric car that's also autonomous. And most people won't buy cars at all by then. They'll just take autonomous taxis. So the costs will just collapse. And so even though your UBI will be fixed, you'll be able to buy more and more and more with your UBI. The UBI becomes just an amount that you get from the government that entitles you to a certain amount of the total production in the economy each week that you get your weekly government check. So that's the way I see it happening. I don't really see any alternative methods. If I saw an alternative method that was more likely, or which would be better, then that's the one I would be predicting. But I see you've got my website up.
We're going through kind of like a transition, and there's superabundance and unlimited clean energy and end of state technologies, perfect health. Like I don't know. I'm looking at these, and some of these seem like wonderful ideas. Better life for the elderly, low stress and quiet, transportation and transformation. You have optimal mental health and well-being, and religion and worldview. The end of unmet materials needs and the end of health problems result in transformation of worldview. There will be less suffering. God will seem less cruel and capricious. People will find meaning and purpose in simple things. Human connection and harmonious human relations will become an important focus. An end of war, which I'm a little skeptical of end of war and end of dictatorships. Because I kind of am concerned of, automated, dictatorship or some kind of form of, people using AI as a form of dystopian dictatorship. But these are great outlines for potential, goals of what an economic singularity could look like, especially when you're talking universal basic income. But ending war, I guess, and like how do we, like right now we're seeing Hamas and Israel and Ukraine and Russia, and pretty soon, who knows, Taiwan and China. I'm kind of concerned because I side with the people. I don't really like government in general. I'm not very much of a big fan when it comes to wars, because it seems like most wars are solved with a pen and paper behind a desk at some point, and the people are the ones that suffer on both sides. And like you mentioned, they're forced to pick a side. Like here in Wisconsin, we have the Green Bay Packers, and in Illinois, they have the Chicago Bears, and it's a rivalry, right? But how do we end wars, and how do we convince governments to end wars? And it kind of ties into what you mentioned in your initial statement about reaching out to extraterrestrial civilizations or being ready for that. Do you think globalization is required in order for us to move forward in space travel and communication with potential extraterrestrial life forms that are on different planets? Or do you think that's something that's just going to happen on its own on its own whenever, or when we're ready, I guess?
Good question. I think we have to ask the question. I think definitely there's extraterrestrial civilizations out there, and I think that there will be technology to travel between stars, maybe not very fast, but at some percentage of the speed of light, so that within hundreds or thousands of years, an unmanned spacecraft could easily travel between star systems. So we have to ask the question, why haven't they contacted us? Because there's a very low probability that we are the first intelligent civilization to develop in our galaxy. There's probably thousands that are already out there. And it's simple to see why they wouldn't contact us. We're underdeveloped. They don't want to interfere. Our own experience with interfering with underdeveloped civilizations on our own planet, it's just an enormous amount of work, and it's not very rewarding. It's much better just to let humans develop on their own, because you'll interfere, like governments are talking about intervening in Haiti right now rather than letting them solve their own problems, and you go in for 10 years like the UN did between 2008 and 2017, and then as soon as they pulled out their police and military forces, the gangs started to take over again, and it just got worse and worse and worse until they assassinated the prime minister and now have forced the interim prime minister out of power, and the gangs have taken control. In Afghanistan, the United States was in there for over a decade, trained local police and military, thought that they were going to run things for at least a few months. They shut down and ran as soon as the United States left. So there's no reward to doing that. So extraterrestrials, I believe, are leaving us alone because that's what they do. This sort of thing, a new civilization coming online, it happens maybe rarely, maybe once every 100,000 years, but over millions of years of time, it's happens all the time, and they're not going to go around intervening. They weren't going to land here during Roman times and say, okay, we're going to show you how to do things and stop you from having wars in the future. Do we even want that? It's great that we had our history, that we were able to go through these struggles. What is the purpose of life? Is it to win the game, or is it to play the game? It's been a great game. We may not like everything that happens. There's a lot of suffering, and the same is true in the life of any individual, but there aren't too many people who would say, take me out of the game, because this is too much suffering and not enough fun. So there is a spiritual and moral philosophical component to that. But you have to think about what would be the time that they would contact us. And one thing about the end state is that we will have the optimal end state technology, which will be the same technology that extraterrestrial civilizations had, some of them for millions of years already. So we will match them in technological level. And so there won't be any technological transfer if we make contact with them beyond 2030, or let's say another 10 years to adopt and implement all that technology. If we make contact by 2040, we'll be contacting them as equals, technological equals. Another thing that would be really important is that they don't have to come and help us solve our political and social problems. So we would have to have an end to war. I mentioned that in my my post on the End State 2030 theory, that I believe there will be an end to war. We're actually going to go through a period from a few years ago through the technological end state itself in 2030 and a little bit beyond, when there will be an increased risk of war because the elites and authoritarians are trying to hold on to power
struggle. Yeah.
So we'll get through that, and beyond the end state, these elites and authoritarians who have got us into so many wars and are recklessly getting into wars now. Even there's a lot of suspicion that China might attack Taiwan, and they might, because it's an authoritarian government. There's a lot of corruption. They want to hold on to power. They want to oppress the people. They're already doing it in parts of the country, and they could expand that system that they're using to imprison and re-educate the Uyghurs. They could expand that countrywide if they had to. Now, that's something you mentioned, that technology can set people free. It can also be used to oppress people. So the people of China will have a chance to rise up and push the government out, or maybe the government will become enlightened and decide to change and adopt democracy.
Well, I certainly think that that's probably going to be one of the primary issues that comes up once we get to that point of disruption following the point of 2030, because, we are, it's sort of similar to that issue with big pharma and them coming up against, the cure for all diseases. We are living in this point where essentially all governments have existed in a state of, the machinations of megalomaniacal madmen, essentially, to maintain their control. Essentially the whole concept of government is based upon control. And we're already currently seeing a lot of these issues unfold on the world stage with the United States empires, unipolar hegemony sort of being challenged with the rise of the BRICS nations and things of that nature, causing all of this, geopolitical turmoil, and has essentially always been the case. Earlier you mentioned, Russia and Ukraine, and we know for a fact that conflict was facilitated by the United States, by NATO, with the coup in 2014 and other meddlings similar to, things that have been going on, say in with Israel and Palestine, with the facilitation of the illegal colony in Israel and the apartheid that's been occurring, and even with Russia meddling in its neighbors and all of those things, China and whatnot. And so we have all of these tyrannical systems of government, Britain, France included, just doing all of their colonialist meddling things, trying to hold on to their little niches of power as the world is starting to wake up and shake off this idea of, hey, why do we allow these psychopaths to have these incredibly important positions of power and all of this money and all of these weapons and the potentiality to end the entire existence of our species with these devastating nuclear weapons? So as society is starting to be like, realizing these things and sort of shifting away from that mindset and causing these conflicts, and even beyond that, conflicts erupting within the authoritarian power structure of which authoritarian is going to have how much power, because everyone wants to have the power, but nobody wants to lose their power, sort of thing. How essentially do you believe that it's going to, I'm not sure how to phrase this question, actually.
How are people going to give up their power and allow this utopia to exist when we have so many different ideologies and people are fighting? It'd be nice to be able to say, okay, yeah, maybe in small areas or segments, small, new cities in America or in different countries where they're building smart cities and they're trying these new mega, futuristic worlds. It's going to take a while for a lot of countries to catch up, and there's going to be people who are going to be, I would say, hesitant to giving up their power, especially when we have such, I would say, such a large power structure. And the United Nations has been very faulty, not very good at what it does at keeping peace, at least not through diplomacy. Maybe through war they do a good job, but it's really hard to see it happening and as a global construct. And I'd like to say, okay, it'd be nice. We have a global government. Everything is elected properly, but it doesn't work that way. There's a lot of rough edges that will need to be worked out in order for us to work forward in economic singularity. And I think that we need to have an idea of, how are we going to get nations to be able to want to buy into this and say, hey, yeah, let's all create a global government that's a construct and give up our wars that, for land. And there's religious views. There's just a lot of complication when it comes to war. So how do we get there? How do we what do you think is going to be the main reason that governments are going to want to just dissolve and allow utopia to exist?
Well, I don't think they will. They're not going to just allow it to happen. It's going to come from the public demand, and the public can only demand something when they are informed of what's in their interest. So it comes from an informed public interest that motivates people to take action and take power from the government. People would much rather let the government handle things. People don't like responsibility. There was a book written, I think, in the 1940s. Eric Fromm. It was called "Escape from Freedom." He talked about why people are willing to let communist and Nazi governments take power, and they just don't want freedom. It's frightening to be in charge. Increasingly, people have to take charge. They have to take responsibility. They have to grow as adults and become mature and responsible. We are encouraged to continue to be children throughout our lives and let the government take care of things. That's what we've been told to do since the 1930s. We invited government to solve all our problems because the Great Depression was too big and scary. And then, lead us into wars, and that's not working for us. That's resulted in all kinds of terrible things happening. We have a system where the elites decide we need to get into a war. They don't think it through very well because they're not very good at thinking through problems. They're not very good at coordinating, so they try and keep things basic and simple. So they decide we're going to invade Afghanistan, Iraq, and then they put the propaganda machine into gear to convince the people that that's what they need to do and it's a wonderful thing, and whatever reasons the people might want to do it, that's the reason they're given. Iraq was originally never justified as a war against terror, but in the public's mind it became a war against terror because that's what sold. That was the message that sold. So we need enough people who are not going to fall into the propaganda, who are going to be enlightened. We need a sort of public enlightenment. The original Enlightenment was, I think, in the 1700s. That's when the ideas that underlie democracy were created by philosophers, and the idea that the public could be involved in government. It's never fully taken place. We have to make that reality, and the only way to make that reality is to empower people through information, ideas, knowledge. We have to cut through the propaganda and get to the truth. We see the elites fighting back. They want to censor the truth. They want to censor social media, the parties in power, the elite interests in the media. They have power over government, power over media, and they are invisible. They're working from behind the scenes to decide the way the world should be, and then just through the government and media impose that on people. As far as the United Nations is a hoax. It's people had this idea that government could bring peace. So they wanted a world government that would impose peace on the world. That would have been a terrible idea, to have that much power concentrated in a single authority. So it's good it didn't happen. But what we got was first the League of Nations, replaced by the United Nations, and it's sort of a placeholder for enthusiasts of world government, so they can say, yeah, we've got world government. It's the United Nations. What they have tried to do, peacekeeping is a hoax as well. There's no such activity as peacekeeping. It just doesn't exist. They send soldiers who are trained to fight wars into a country, and they paint their helmets blue and say, okay, you're a peacekeeper now. Those soldiers have no idea what peacekeeping is. They don't actually do anything called peacekeeping because there is no such thing as peacekeeping. So it's a hoax organization that invented a hoax peacekeeping to justify their existence and make it look like they're doing their original job, their original goal of establishing a world government that will create peace. They've done nothing of the sort. When UN troops went to Rwanda in 1994. It resulted in one of the greatest massacres in recent history. And I think the UN troops were at least partly to blame, because when you go in and you pretend you're going to keep fighting sides apart and you let them, get into a frenzy against each other, and you say, well, we're going to keep you apart. And then what they did is nothing. They did nothing, because peacekeeping does not exist. They weren't allowed to hold the warring sides apart. And so when the warring sides got at each other, there was massacres that took place. And that's not the only example. Similar things happened in Bosnia. I don't want to get into the details too much, but suffice to say, the UN and any sort of world government is not the solution. They're part of the problem. They're part of the way the international elites are hoaxing the public and creating institutions that are little more than propaganda institutions. They're there to make people think they're doing good things. The peacekeeping program was a propaganda to make it look like the United Nations was doing something, and to create jobs for various militaries after the Cold War ended so that they could get funding for their militaries. We need transparency on all these things. That's the way we're going to disrupt elite control. As far as ending war, that's going to happen once the people end elite control, because the wars are created by elites for their own power, for their own interests. It's not in the public interest. The people don't want to go to war against each other. They want peace. They want prosperity. So once a country becomes democratic and evolves even further to become truly democratic with an informed public, then we will have world peace. And then we will have contact with extraterrestrials. The extraterrestrials are not going to come and solve our problems. That's something that will happen after, once we've solved our own problems. All of this will be greatly accelerated as we approach and pass through the technological end state in 2030. Beyond 2030, and I estimate before 2040, we will resolve our political and social problems. We will end war, because it's going to be intense. There's going to be a lot of changes going on, and there's going to be an enormous disruption, a lot of conflict, wars and rumors of wars. It's going to be a very difficult situation, but through it all, the people are going to have to take their rightful place as the rulers in a democracy throughout the world. And that's what's going to bring about peace in the end.
So, listener in the chat asked, nuclear fusion power before 2030. For our listeners out there, what is nuclear fusion power? Is that like a new style of clean energy, or is that something that's still borderline questionable technology that isn't quite there yet?
Nuclear fusion is, they say it's a technology that's been 10 years away for the past 30 or 40 years. I think it's still going to be 10 years away in 2030. It's not going to arrive by the end state. I don't think we need it. Solar power is already so inexpensive that if we combine it with battery storage, which will become more and more inexpensive as years go on, and certainly solar plus battery storage will be the cheapest form of energy by 2030, and will continue to drop in price thereafter. We're going to completely convert to solar, maybe some wind power. The sun is the biggest fusion reactor in the sky. That's what fusion is. You have to use compression to compress hydrogen, and it fuses to form helium. Hydrogen's the smallest atom. Helium's the second biggest atom. So it actually creates higher complexity matter. That's very difficult. The nuclear power we have we do the opposite. We take our heaviest elements, or some of the heaviest elements, plutonium and uranium, And those, because they're so heavy, they have a tendency to break down, especially if you add some more neutrons. And so if you basically put a pile of uranium or uranium-235 or plutonium together, it will explode. That's how atomic bombs work. If you put them together close enough that they start releasing energy rather than exploding, then you have a nuclear reactor. You can use that to heat liquid medium, and that can produce steam and drive a generator. So I don't think we'll have either in the future. I think fusion power is not going to happen. I think fission power, what we have today, nuclear reactors, it's just too risky. There's already been a meltdown at Chernobyl, so that's a technical failure. There's been a natural disaster at Fukushima. That's a natural disaster failure. The third mode of failure is a terrorist attack. That hasn't happened yet. Hopefully it doesn't. But nuclear power is very safe and wonderful until there's one of these three failure modes, catastrophic failure modes, and it leaves an entire vast area uninhabitable for possibly millennia. So we need to move on to other cleaner, safer technologies, and solar is just going to outcompete everything.
Right. So Mike DeVerde in the chat also asked, what are your thoughts on the super longevity or the potential for reaching super longevity prior to 2030?
That's a good question. I don't really know. I think definitely we're going to live longer. I hope we solve some of the social issues that are causing our life expectancy to actually decline. That's mostly because of deaths of younger people, which disproportionately affects the average. People are dying from drug overdoses and suicides. Those are social problems we have to solve. The opioid epidemic certainly had an impact there. We can somewhat solve those technologically, as I mentioned, with opioid-like drugs that are not addictive. But people won't die in accidents because autonomous cars will be available and won't get into accidents. Cancer will be cured. I've known quite a lot of people who have died from cancer over the past 10 years. It seems to be one of the major illnesses that is still killing people at a relatively young age. Some of them in their 40s, 50s. So curing that is going to increase longevity and life expectancy. I think we'll definitely get cures for Alzheimer's and dementia, and that will result in a better quality of life, or what's called health span. So we'll be able to live into old age with more clarity of mind, more physical energy due to the treatments available. Is it possible to have lifespan extension? There's nothing that's really been worked on right now that would indicate that that is possible in humans. So I can't really say. My own question about that is what the impact would be if people didn't die.
I mean, that would be kind of a cool philosophy where you could just read every book in the library and have plenty of time to do it as long as you took care of yourself. And there's a lot of things that are out there like synthetic biology and CRISPR gene editing. And now we're talking animal human hybrids and bionic plants. And what's your thoughts on synthetic biology? Because I know that when we're talking super longevity and, you know, Google execs saying that there's people that live to be 500 years old, there's so many different varieties of life extension out there, from downloading information to the computer, cloning, all this stuff. But synthetic biology, bionics, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that there's going to be implication of us man-made biology impacting Mother Nature's original perfected form of biology? Or do you think it's going to work cohesively with it or be rejected by Mother Nature?
Well, I think it's going to be limited, but it's going to be highly beneficial. What will be possible? Growing cells or organs to replace defective cells, doing CRISPR gene editing technology, that sort of thing should be possible. A related field is synthetic meat. They're actually growing animal meats in the lab, so growing human organs that can replace defective organs, or just cell and gene therapies that can repair human organs is certainly possible. The question related to longevity and transhumanism is, will we be able to just keep replacing parts and live for a very long time? It's an open question. I don't think there's anything in the technological trends that would enable us to answer yes or no. I'm concerned about philosophically how we would be impacted if people never died. Certainly, death has been a very large part of people's lives. It motivates them to do things while they're alive because they know they have limited time. It makes place for the next generation, so there would be a potential issue with overpopulation. I know there's ideas that we're going to go out to other planets and colonize them. I don't think that's very practical. Mars is not as nice a place to live for humans as...
You don't like Mars? How about the moon? Is there like a planet that you prefer? Is there options? Are there options out there? Like I never understood why we're not colonizing the moon, because it's like right there, and it's like if there's something that goes on, you need surgery, take you only a couple days to get back to Earth versus, what is it, months to Mars. I don't know why Elon targeted Mars. Is it because the moon is spoken for? Does somebody own the moon? I think we did a whole show on this once, Don. And we found out that somebody claims to have owned the moon, but nobody really does. Nobody really does. They're just selling land on the moon, though.
Well, there's definitely people going to be going up to the moon. There's sort of a new space race between nations to get back to the moon, and there's commercial development that's going to be possible with the Starship spacecraft. It will be possible to launch a lot of very large payloads into Earth orbit very inexpensively, and that sort of creates a gateway to the moon and Mars. It becomes possible to do things there. As far as humans wanting to live there or needing to live there, we'll have the autonomous technology that everything can be done on those bases by robots. Humans won't have to live there. They won't have to do jobs there. So it's a question, will they want to live there just for fun? Decades ago, it was predicted that a lot of people would be living at the bottom of the sea by now, in underground, undersea habitats. And they were right. It's possible now. It's technologically possible. People just don't want to do it. There are some undersea habitats, these little fun submarines that will take you down there, and you can spend a few days living in an undersea hotel. But after that, you're done. You don't want to... It turns from a fun experience into a nightmare when you're living there for months and years. Same with the space station. The astronauts are really suffering. They don't let you know that because they're experts at public relations, and they're always smiling, and that's what they're supposed to do, is make space exploration seem like a great time. But their bones are suffering, their bodies are changing, they are physically sick, vomiting a lot of the time because of the weightlessness, and they're stuck in a tin can in space for months at a time, which would drive most people crazy within a few hours, few days. So those would be something like the conditions on the moon or Mars. And I can imagine people wanting to go out there. It'd be a fantastic experience to go out to the moon or Mars. But if Mars is a 6-month journey, it's probably not worth it. I think we will have technology that can get us between star systems. So I don't think chemical rockets are going to be used very much for trips out to Mars. I think the Starship will get us into orbit, and then we'll have some sort of nuclear technology that can get us from Earth orbit to Mars in just a few weeks instead of months. And so some people may want to take that journey just to experience Mars, and it would be an amazing thing. But people aren't going to go there Yeah, we're not going to relocate large numbers of humans there, so we have to maintain our population here on Earth and live here. It's a great place, really. It needs a bit of work to fix it up and to maintain it, but it's the best place for humans is right here on planet Earth.
Don, did you pick a planet? Where are you moving to?
Nah, I'd much prefer just to stay right here.
You're gonna stay right here on Earth. You're not gonna go to Pluto or one of the colder planets. You can go to the hotter ones, not Venus, not Mars.
I'm okay. I'd much rather send a robot there and just like VR, like through virtual reality with a robot on the planet. Just make it seem like I'm there.
Yeah, VR is crazy, dude. Because I put on some goggles and it really tricked my body. Like my body thinks, like I almost get a headache because my body thinks I'm in places that I'm not, but I don't. Like it's the senses are off, so visually I see I'm there, but physically I don't feel that I'm there. Like if you're underwater, you don't feel the water, but your brain is seeing that you're underwater. It's fascinating what VR can do, and the idea that we'll be able in the future maybe see you can see concerts in VR, all this stuff. But living underwater, you think that would be something we'd have a giant like Atlantis city built underwater already that is at the bottom of the ocean where we can live. It makes me wonder, if we've accomplished that. You think the military would be on that as well? Where do we go from here? I guess the questions have been coming in, but we're wrapping up Futurism Week, David, and you are our final guest in the Futurism Week segments, and it's something that's been really interesting to Don and I. Like we've had a lot of conversations about economic singularity. We've had a lot of interesting conversations about potentially meeting extraterrestrials and hyper or advanced technology, self-driving cars, the world that we know of being a utopian agenda, and everyone has a different idea of which way it will go. My biggest concern is between now and then, there is definitely a ramped up potential of some kind of catastrophe, either a world war or something that could totally set back any kind of agenda of super, advanced singularity, super longevity, economic singularity. And what are some of your concerns? Because we have literally 7 minutes left. And I was kind of curious to see what are some of the bigger concerns that you have coming up that might prevent economic singularity.
Well, I think the most probable scenario would be if China invades Taiwan. I think unlike Russia invading Ukraine, they wouldn't use nuclear weapons as a threat. They would actually use them, probably not against land targets, but they would use them against the United States aircraft carriers. They might hit select land targets, American bases in the Far East. I think they're not going to go to war and invade Taiwan unless they're going to go to win. And if it would take nuclear weapons to do that, I think, again, they're not going to threaten. They're just going to use them. Or they might threaten, but it won't be an empty threat the way it's been with the Russian government. So the highest risk would be a nuclear war. It doesn't have to escalate, so it's not necessarily a threat to the world, but it's definitely a risk of high-level destruction. Now, China would be foolish to invade Taiwan. They would disrupt the entire world economy. They would tank their own economy because they're so dependent on foreign trade. So that doesn't mean they won't do it, because it didn't make any sense for the Russians to invade Ukraine either. People were saying, no, they'll never do that. Too disruptive to their own economy. But they did. And this is what we're facing. This is a kind of potential risk. So I'm not sure what else could happen. I think there will be revolutions throughout the world, especially in the more authoritarian countries. It's not impossible in democracies, I don't think that would end our progress and our transition to the end state and the economic singularity and the post end state economy. But it would certainly be, it's going to be challenging for a lot of people. It's going to be stressful. And at the same time, if they're losing their jobs due to technology, there's going to be a demand for changes. People definitely won't be happy if initially, when the technological improvements come in, if the large tech monopolies are using that to secure ever increasing profits. I'm surprised people haven't already taken action against those monopolies or demanded action. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, there were industrial monopolies. They were ended because of popular political pressure. The governments benefited because they were paid off by these big monopolies, and it's the same today with the big tech monopolies. They support the government in various ways. The social media companies support the government with donations and directly through censoring points of view that the government doesn't like. So it's very convenient for the government to allow these monopolies to exist. But when these big transitions start happening, people are becoming already more and more informed of what's going on. And if these companies try and maintain control, maintain their monopolies, and especially if they use it to make more profit by reducing their staffs and using AI, and just use that as another way to get monopolistic profits, that's not going to make people happy. So we're going to see some disruption. It doesn't need to become violent, especially if the democratic outlets are there. Karl Marx believed that companies would become more and more profitable because they controlled the government. Turns out they didn't. Democracy actually worked, and they brought in antitrust legislation. The people were able to prevail and get more of what was in their interest, and the monopolies were broken down.
Hey, David, so we're running out of time here, and I want to give you a chance to plug your stuff. Can you let the listeners know where can they find out more about David Patterson? And thank you again for joining us. It was a very informational episode for our listeners out there, and I really thank you for bringing in your points of view. End State 2030 is your website, but just for our listeners out there, where can they find out more? Where can they support you and find your work?
Endstate2030.com is the website that has the outline of this theory. I also have a social project called Active Community. You can find that at activecommunity.group. I'm on X, David Patterson X, at David Patterson X on X, formerly known as Twitter. So those are the ways people can reach out to me through social media, or my email address is on those two websites, so they can reach out to me.
All right, David, thank you.
I'd be happy to hear from you.
What was that?
I'd be happy to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for joining us. What a great show. Appreciate you, David. And by the way, guys, make sure you check out David Patterson's stuff out there. Great stuff, great guest. As we are running out of time, we have a couple minutes here, and I wanted to make sure we had a chance to kind of recap Futurism Week. Don, what are your thoughts on the Futurism Week here that we just had?
Well, I think it's been, a really fantastic time. Those last 3 weeks, I've certainly learned a lot. I definitely want to extend, on behalf of both myself and yourself, great thanks to Mike DeVerde for helping to, put this thing together. It's been really fun. And, I'm interested to learn more about it, and I'm certainly interested to see the ways in which this sort of stuff continues to develop and, just what the future holds.
That being said, guys, this Monday, a very special thing is happening. Kristan T. Harris will be hosting the American Journal for Harrison Smith over on Infowars.com, opening up right before Alex Jones. And we have some crazy, awesome guests lined up. Mark D'Antonio will be joining us to talk about the Eclipse, top astronomer, personal friend of mine. Clyde Lewis, the man, the myth, the legend behind Ground Zero, one of the largest late night talk radio programs in America will be joining us to talk the Eclipse and why are people so obsessed with the Eclipse. And maybe we might have one more, but that was my special awesome announcement that's going on next week. So make sure Monday morning, 8 a.m., check out band.video, find the American Journal, or just tune into InfoWars. We'll be there. I'm your host, Kristan T. Harris. And what a great week it's been. Futurism Week, week 3. Maybe we'll have to do it every year. And Mike DeVerde, always welcome to recommend guests and get them on the show. I appreciate all the support, all the donations people have given to us. You can donate on therundownlive.com. Listen, nothing speaks louder than keeping us on the air. We reach thousands of people. If each of you donated $1, just $1, that would help us out a ton. 100,000 views, that'd be $100,000. You know, we could be having like a bunch of people on, famous people. We could be having people writing articles in a pro gear and stuff. If everyone just donated $1, it's crazy to think about that. We reach so many people, and we need to stay on air. So we need your help. Check out therundownlive.com. Support this brand, support this broadcast, and support independent news and talk radio. You guys stay blessed. We'll see you next week.
You're listening to the Destroyers of Fake News, Kristan T. Harris and Don Vire Jr. on the Rundown Live, your forecast into the future.